So, hello everyone. Welcome for coming. As more and more people come in. This is the first of our webinar series following Empathy Week, which was last week, and we're continuing the conversation. I'm very pleased to say we have got Minta Dial here, who is an ambassador for Empathy Week, and I suppose one of the people for me that really sparked my brain thinking about empathy a couple of years ago, and we've remained good friends. And he's here to talk about empathy and how do you build empathy and how do you get along with people that you disagree with, which is probably a skill I think the world needs to learn more now than ever. He's a thought leader, he's an author, he's worked at L'Oreal for 16 years, I believe, and has been in their executive committee along their product line. He's also head of Redken worldwide for many years. And as you can see behind him, has just released a new book, You Lead, which I've also got here alongside his first book, Heartificial Empathy, which I'm a big fan of. And we're going to just talk between us a lot about, empathy and try and think about ways that we can use this in our lives, use it moving forward. And so I'm going to pass on to Minta now, who's going to lead this discussion.
Well, Ed, thank you very much for having me on the show, or at least in part of your Empathy Week. It's been a great pleasure to be part of ambassador with you on a wonderful mission. And certainly, I feel like I've learned from you, Ed, along the way. And as I've approached this, I've always looked at empathy in the business sphere amongst adults. And I think it's a really interesting idea to push it down, if you will, into starting off earlier and understanding it. So one of the things that I like to do, Ed, is I like interaction. So anyone who's on, you are hopefully able to chat away, tell us where you're from, and any questions you have, do feel free to chat, and we'll try and correspond and bring that in. So one of the first things I'd like to do is ask you to do a quick poll, which Ed has just put up. So it's on your screens, hopefully.
I'm going to read it now. There we go.
So the question is, how empathetic do you consider yourself in general? Well above average, average, below average, or well below average? And of course, we don't exactly have a statistically viable number in total, but thank you for voting. We've got, 6, 10, a couple more.
A few more to go. And Catherine's just said hello. She's in London. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. All right, we've got 7. What do you think? 8. Are we going to get everybody? 8 out of 11, 9 out of 11. Yay, 2 more people. All right, come on in and vote. Vote quickly.
Some people are arriving now as well.
That's right. 10 out of 11.
Spread.
Yeah, nice. All right, well, let's call it a day there. And so what do we have? We have 40%, 4 out of the 10 who voted above average, 3 well above average, and then 2 average and 1 below average. Well, the funny thing is, Ed, this is absolutely in line with the poll that I've been doing for the last 2 years, where I've asked this to about 10,000 people, and these are generally adults, I have to say. And the answer usually is 73% consider themselves above average or well above average. So here we're at 70%. 23% consider themselves average, and 4% for the rest, below average. So it basically, within a rounding goes on, is absolutely in line. Well, there's a challenge with that, Ed. What do you think the challenge is?
I think if you asked, I'd say if you asked the question, how empathetic do you think other people are towards you, the result might be flipped, is my inkling.
That's a beautiful example. And really, at the end of the day, first of all, statistically speaking, there is a thing called an average. And we don't like to be called average. Oh, if I said to you, you're a very average person. How do you react to that, right?
It's
If
like
you
someone
called,
calling you nice, isn't it? As a compliment.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And so the underneath this issue is the reverse, as in you were just saying, how other people perceive you in your empathy. And there's definitely a discord, a disconnect. First of all, just from a self-awareness standpoint, we can't all be above average, 73% above average. There's an issue with that. Really, we should have 50% hitting average and then the rest spilling down and above. But so we have this notion of self-awareness that needs to be brought in. We may think we are, but maybe we're not quite as empathetic as we are. And to your other point, there are two types of empathy which are interesting. One is the empathy that you are considering towards the other, and then there's the empathy being felt by the receiver. And the first isn't a lack of empathy. If I'm thinking about you, Ed, in your situation, I'm looking at you. I'm trying to suss out your feelings. What are you thinking? You're going in your mind. It's Monday morning, 9:06. How many people are on the show? What am I trying to do? How's it going? I'm thinking about your situation. I'm exercising empathy,
Mm.
but you may or may not feel it. My point, what I really like to do is try to already start being empathic yourself. What do you think about that? This notion of active and passive empathy feelings, like the one I'm exercising it, and the feeling side of it. Can there be a difference? What's your opinion about that?
Um, yeah, I hadn't even thought that's interesting, because then as soon as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, what are you thinking? You know,
Mm.
I'm starting my busy week, and Ed's asked me to come on to a show, and I'm speaking to people that aren't usually maybe my audience. I think it's very empathy for me is very much, and maybe we should define it as well. I'll be interested to know your definition for people on the show as well. But I think empathy for me is has to be is an active process, um, or it's more effective as an active process, and it takes effort. For me, is particularly, I don't feel that empathy is a passive process or is as easy as an active one. I don't know if I'm answering your question
Well,
correctly
so
there.
let me just make precise this one
Yeah.
issue. The one that I am exercising, let's say in this
Mm.
dialogue between Ed and Minter, Minter is attempting to exercise empathy by understanding what Ed is thinking, feeling, or experiencing, which, by the way, is my definition of empathy. Ed, on the other hand, is listening to Minter, and is Ed feeling that Minter is being empathic? So there's the one which I am exercising it, and you are the receiver of it. I call it the active and the passive in this
Mm.
regard. But the point is, I stop at the action point that follows the empathic reading. So I'm exercising in my mind. I'm feeling things. I'm understanding things, but I'm not necessarily doing anything about it. You, on the other hand, will implicitly be receiving what I'm doing about it, but you may not perceive the fact that I'm really
Mm.
thinking about you. And the what I and certainly I think is important to start with just that exercise. Don't jump to what I've got to do. And that's the issue, is that if you think I need to be compassionate with you, Ed, or I want to give you sympathy, you're like, I'm not asking for your sympathy. That's not what I want. Just understand me. So my definition, Ed, is understanding what the person in front of you is thinking, feeling, or experiencing, and do it in a deep level so you can hopefully even ask questions, qualify, make sure you've got it right before you start acting on it.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's the difficult thing. You see someone who needs your help, you go to help. I always kind of use the example of someone on the street and various things that I've done around homelessness the past few years, where I use this as an example. You see someone on the street and you go into a shop and you buy them food, and you might buy them, I don't know, a ham sandwich. and you come out and you give it to them, and your brain has seen that person and you know, made an assumption about their experience without having engaged with that person, but you're assuming from just perceiving their appearance and where they are in life. And you go to give that ham sandwich, and then they say, well, I don't eat meat. And that's your first interaction you've had with that person,
Right.
where you've actually understood something about them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Empathy Week's trying to do last week as well, as right, stop. Yes, we know there's lots of problems in the world. And empathy isn't just about problems either. And I think we should make that clear. It's not about compassion. Empathy is, as you said, it's about understanding someone. And we're so quick to rush into action, but actually an action's great and we need it, but we need that bit in the middle, which for me is empathy and curiosity. And unfortunately for us humans who are now so reliant on instant gratification, whether that's a like or a retweet or this or that, we want it now, and actually it takes time. And then moving on from that, because it does take time, and what you've just said about understanding people and, you know, understanding the process that someone is feeling, how do you do that if you fundamentally disagree with someone, which is the title of this talk and why we're here. How do you as a person give space to someone? Because in today's day and age, on your phone, if you're following someone and they say something, the easiest thing to do is unfollow. And I've got rid of that person that I disagree with, because I don't want to see it, because I don't believe in what they're saying. I don't understand what they're saying. I think they just don't see the world in the same way, so I'm not going to follow them. What's the danger of that? And then how do we move forward as a society to actually understand those people? And why is it important to understand people that we disagree with?
So I have a philosophy which basically answers all of those questions with one really important thing, which is understand yourself first. If you have an awareness of the things that you like, that's great. But it's even more powerful when you have an awareness of who you are and what are you trying to be. Because in the end of the day, when you're approaching somebody that has an opinion that's contrary to yourself, why are you engaging with this person? And if you can be honest with yourself, I'm doing this because I want to grow. I'm doing this because I would like to learn. I'm doing this because I like to be known as the connector. Okay, that seems like a reasonable place to start. And therefore your intentions with regard to this other person are going to be better off. If on the other hand, it's, well, I've got to beat this guy. I need to change their opinion because they're wrong. Well, not only is that a very confrontational approach, really what you're trying to do is, or you're showing, is a weakness that you have. It's like a chip on the shoulder. And so the biggest thing in all of this is really to spend time thinking about yourself. Who are you and what do you want to achieve? And if you do that homework beforehand, when you get into an engagement with somebody that has a contrary opinion, you're gonna feel the long play. You're not gonna go for the quick win. Well, I told you so, or that was wrong, or you're stupid. You're gonna pull back because you know that the big picture is, what I'm trying to do here is learn. I'm trying to grow. I have an intention to connect people. So the way that works is, especially when you get into a topic that's really thorny, that really excites you, whatever your football team is, they're the worst, right? Oh, wow, how can you say that? Those are things that are triggering in you, let's say part to your reptilian brain. And so I'm a big fan of Liverpool Football Club. Sorry, anyone who hates them. But that doesn't mean I can't entertain watching a game well played by others, because what I'm looking for is good sports, good sportsmanship. Of course, I prefer when Liverpool wins, but I don't want them to win if they don't play in a sporting fashion. So I you have to understand what the things that are going to trigger you. So you have to know yourself well, and then you can avoid being snipped off and shooting out some kind of nasty words or too quick. You don't need to say like that. Think about and feel your reactions, your emotions in your body as you get into the topic, and then you can sort of try to at least understand them and embrace them. That'll help you stop from saying something you regret, and that'll make the conversation go southward. What do you think about that, Ed?
I think it's a great point. I think catching yourself in a moment where your emotions go through, it's almost like your heart rate, isn't it? Just as soon as it goes up or as soon as something comes out of rest mode, noticing that and pulling back. And I think what I found really useful is what you've just said, seeing it as a learning opportunity. So something that does irritate me or annoy me that someone else might say, I actually, rather than, oh, I want to prove you wrong, it's I want to understand why, or I want to understand why you think like this. But for students who might be on this, who might be younger and or watching this back, how do you understand yourself at 13 years old, or 17, or 18, or even 21 if you're at university and watching this? Because I think it sounds very easy, and we see it in lots of posts across media and newspapers and articles and things, understand yourself. And I think that gets mixed up with this self-love kind of phrase that's been dominating the past decade in media, which I don't actually think is particularly useful a lot of the time. But this understand yourself, how do you understand yourself? How do you, what's the active process to go about that? Because I don't think, I think back to my kind of life and my ideas and things that were often suppressed at school because you're taught a certain way you're in this system, and okay, the next thing you need to do is work towards that, get to the end of the year. Okay, then next year I've got exams, and I'm not really thinking about what my own identity is. I feel like identity is crushed often. How do you understand yourself? What's the active processes to doing that?
Well, so first of all, I think that there is a genuine issue in our world where we're not even allowed to express certain feelings and opinions. We get censored very quickly because that's off topic, or at least that's not we're not allowed to talk about politics. We're not allowed to talk about religion. These are topics which we're not allowed to talk about. So we're all now structured and educated in this thing, but that's a challenge, because that's areas where we're actually most passionate about. And if we can't talk about things where we feel passion, then we don't feel we are ourselves. And I agree with you. I think in society we've got to find ways to allow for us to talk about hot topics, where it's not necessarily about you against, but it's you with me. I can learn about what you believe. Here's what I believe. And so to your point, well, how do you discover these things? Well, I mean, when you're younger, you haven't explored the world yet. Your limitations, you support Liverpool Football Club or Chelsea Football Club or whomever, because that's what your dad did, or that's the nearby team, and you choose that, but you haven't sort of learned about necessarily supporting the Fenerbahce in Turkey, or that you haven't gone further until you do. And then when you do, oh, that's the one I want to do. I'm a Glasgow, or I'm a Celtics fan, Rangers fan, or whatever. And you explore things. So I think that as a youngster, what's interesting is to sort of understand what are the things that you're really excited about, and just put those down on a paper. I love my family. I love my town. I love this football club. What do you love? What are the things that you are genuinely interested in? And these will be things that you feel like you want to defend. And then you can also recognize that those are the things that are going to trigger you if you invest so much in them that they're going to be you. So if Chelsea loses tomorrow, oh, I'm going to get crushed. The key point isn't what you believe. It's not about what happens. It's about how you react to what happens that counts. And so if you can just identify what you have this crazy passion for. I love Lego pieces. You know, my nephew Brody, he loves Lego pieces. So I have my little Lego piece here. And if the Lego pieces are broken, he does a big model and he breaks it. You know, it's a big deal. But he's developed a stoicism. Well, I can rebuild it. Because actually the fun isn't the finished piece, it's getting to the finished piece. So if you look at it differently, all of a sudden, oh, it's like, thank goodness it's broken. I get to do it again. Because that's what's fun about Lego.
I didn't say that when I remember when I was at GCSE age, when I was 14, 15, and I didn't save an essay. I wasn't thinking that, Minto. I wasn't thinking, oh, great, I can do it again and it will be even better. But it's exactly what my dad said to me. He said, well, you've learned, back up your work, and two, you'll realize that the second time you write your essay, you'll be better at it. Hard to swallow when you're 15 and it's an English literature essay, but it's a
Wait,
great way to think.
hard to swallow as a 56-year-old when I've written a 1,200 word article for a magazine and it gets wiped out.
Was it better the second time?
I was so angry, you know, and I didn't do so well. You know, I was angry at myself for not having. Well, actually, there was a power outage, but anyway, stuff.
But you've got the mindset. I want to also talk
By
a
the
little
way,
bit. Yes, sorry.
But it's not a perfect mindset. Because you know the thing is, I wrote this book about empathy, heartificial empathy, and therefore you know I get thank you. I might get called out as like, you know, an expert on empathy, but does that mean that I'm always empathic, perfectly empathic with everybody? God, no. And do I always control all my emotions perfectly? No. So here, Ed, permission not to be perfect, permission not to be okay all the time, because that is tyrannical. And part of our issue in so many of these principles of which we're trying to educate on is that we get a little bit dogmatic about them. And so one of the things I really like to pull back from is the tyranny of empathy and thinking we have to be empathic all the time with everybody. The issue, if you do that, absolutely nothing gets done. Because all we're going to do is, oh, your turn. No, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. I mean, we got to do stuff. We need to have actions. We need to do things, and nothing is going to be perfect, and nothing is going to have zero impact negatively on other. I mean, really, you've got to make choices. And so even in the conversation that you and I are having right now, I chose to interrupt you. That's not empathic. But I felt the need, because that I want to give some things which are actionable, or at least make you feel concretely, oh, I can do this. Because if we go along and say these are the 15 principles you need to follow, and by the third one you've forgotten the first one, and by the 15th it's just a bunch of stupidities. So the key point here is to think about trying to figure out who you are, what you want to be in life, but not in a big way like I want to be a fireman or something. That's whatever, or an actress, or that's another element of it. But do you want to be someone? What's your intention with regard to empathy? Are you interested in learning? Are you interested in connecting with people? And if you can tie into that, then it becomes so much easier. But don't expect to be perfect. Certainly not right away.
I think it's a really good point. And you saying about finding what you're passionate about earlier and what you believe in as part of your understanding your trigger points, I think is so valuable and so vital, because that is, like you say, that when you're going to discover what you stand for, and if you understand that, you know, yes, you may want to be an actress when you're older, or a fireman, or this or that, but you know that you want to do that because that allows you to then go on to do other things that support what you stand for. I was going to lead on to what, and I'm just going to keep it really short and simple, which I'm not very good at doing, but I'm going to let you talk about it. Cancel culture. What do you think about it? That's what I'm going to say.
All right. So I think we've gotten into a situation in society where uh, where everyone's allowed to have an opinion, and I think that's great. The issue is that using social media with lack of regulation that has no real ability to respond is very dangerous. And I think that we're seeing the consequences of that play out in the way democracies and governments are having to run, where everybody can, within microseconds, complain about anything or anybody. And every politician has to face this idea of being thrown out. I mean, even the president of the United States, they're eliminating his account on Twitter, canceling him out, if you will. Not that I appreciate Donald Trump, but I do believe that we as a society need to learn to converse again. And canceling out somebody you don't agree with, I don't find that an appropriate thing. I would much rather us look at freedom of speech, to keep that, because I think that's a really liberating and strong foundational piece of the human being. And two, look at other ways to lean into other people. If you have somebody that doesn't agree with you, has another policy opinion, there's a chance that that person has a different context and came up to that opinion in a different way that's different from your background, your context. And if you can just spend some time thinking, why does that person believe this? Well, if you don't know, try to understand how they got to that idea, but not in a judgmental way, just purely trying to understand. Canceling them out because you disagree with them is a unattractive, I think, solution. It's sort of like killing people. Really, many people have reputations when you that they rely on social media, and trying to cancel them out means you're taking away their job. They don't, maybe some of them rub you the wrong way, but they don't necessarily deserve to go on unemployment and not be able to send their children to school. Not necessarily. Of course, there's some bad people, and that's different. We have a criminal justice case system to deal with criminality. But someone who expresses an opinion different from you, that shouldn't be cancelable. That's what I believe.
It's interesting. How then do we? Because free speech is something that exists in every democracy, um, and it's I think it's come more and more into the picture. How do we promote or keep alive free speech without promoting hate speech? Because some people would come back to you and say, well, Donald Trump has said this and this and incited violence and incited hate and led to, you know, the riots at the Capitol building and all these things, and he was right to be cancelled because actually he was causing actions in a huge thing, in a huge population of people. And some would say also that because of algorithms, you know, some people are pushed to the top and therefore their words are amplified more than others. So it's not just about everyone tweeting. How do we build a society that promotes this free speech and this understanding and this empathy towards other people, even if you don't agree with them, yet reduces the harm of potentially hateful speech? How do we do that?
Well, I don't have the answers to everything. By the way, Kath, I appreciate your comment about the ongoing journey. And please do keep your comments coming in. Um, I think that if we take the Donald Trump situation, it's a really worthwhile case because there's sort of an obvious enemy, certainly of the left, that this person I made this riot happen and so on and so forth. But over 70 million people voted for him. So it's not just him. He is the representation of something that's bigger. So in the notion of understanding freedom of speech, if we cut down more on freedom of speech, then the chances are that that 70 will grow to 80 million people, not the other way around. Of course, the fact that he's not on Twitter means that his noise isn't always available. But do you believe that those 70 million people aren't talking to each other, aren't creating Facebook groups in subversion, if you will, wanting to talk up, going back to nostalgically the time when Trump was on Twitter? That's absolutely happening right now. And so the case when we look at that type of, let's say, unconstitutional or not, there's a process for the United States to decide whether that was an impeachable or not offense and so on. But we need to think about how and why he got there. So if you're on that side of this side, against Trump, we need to be thinking about how and why they've got there, just not shaking them off and saying they're stupid, they're the people who are wrong. And because that's self-righteousness, that's a presumption of I'm right. The always right scenario is not a good way to get into negotiation, and canceling out means I have the authority to say you're wrong. So how do you do it? I think we both need to get off our high horses, both sides, regularly and meet. And there are different techniques within that. So let's say that you are understanding what are the trigger points you have. And by the way, you do need to have things you believe in, because if you believe in nothing, then we're not going to get excited about anything, and then we don't exist. So there's a moderation to this at some level. But what about when you are meeting somebody on an opposing field? And I take a sports analogy. It's a little bit simpler. You, Ed, might be playing for the Greens, and I'm playing for the Blues. And we get on the pitch, and, well, I hate you. You're the enemy, right? You're the opposing team. But Ed, there's something I heard you say. I really love the fact that you're dealing with Empathy Week. You're running this organization. You've led Empathy Week. I really appreciate that. And these are the things that I've learned from you about empathy. So what I'm doing there is I'm finding a terrain of rapport, a relationship on a topic, and I'm expressing vulnerability. I've learned from you. You are bigger than me in this particular regard. You've done something I respect. It has nothing to do with the match between the Greens and the Blues. And then what you do is, Ed, I've said something about you. Now, what would you like to say about me? So you model the behavior. You find a space which is genuinely interesting. Because if you're just saying, well, I like the way your left toenail is colored, yeah, that's not good. That's not tapping into something that's big for me. I mean, you have to start somewhere, but then you do the same thing to me. And just in that moment, we are making a connection. And it's going to help diffuse the entire, wait, when we get into our excited zone, the match, at the end, at least I respect you, Ed. I'm sorry about the match. We beat you, by the way. Just kidding. No. And at the end, we're going to talk about Empathy Week, because that is a terrain of entente. And we're going to build relationships on that and show that just because you're green doesn't mean you're a horrible person. You have other beliefs, but we have areas of grounding which are going to link us in and show that we are actually, at the end of the day, just human beings struggling in our path, in our journey, as Kath talked about.
Amazing. So I'm taking it all in. Please do, if you are online, ask a few questions. We have a question and answer function which is anonymous if you want to, or you can put a question in the chat. This is kind of a question that actually I'll move on from that. I had one question that was like, who is the most disagreeable person in the world according to you, and how would you go about agreeing with them? Maybe we will do that one. Who would you say is your most disagreeable person? Because I think it'd be quite interesting to see how then, what would your steps be to then, because we've talked about it as a generic thing, but then how would you go about actually actioning empathy in a way that allows you to move forward and understand them as you've talked about generically? But how would you do that specifically towards this person?
Well, so actually, I don't tend to have people I don't like. I've built up a mechanism where I try to find good things about that. Or if I really don't like them, well, I don't need toxicity of that person in my zeitgeist. So I don't need to go out and actively convince that person or think about that person. I don't want to have those negative thoughts running around my brain all the time, and I can just sort of let them go. So I really, they're just a thought. That's what meditation is great for. Sometimes we get in our brain, we get stuff wiring, and oh, this is so bad, and he's so horrible, and she's such a bad person. But really, they're just thoughts, and they can just disappear if you let them fly away. But if you grab onto them and make them so meaningful to you, well, the issue is that it's going to have more of an impact on you than anything you can do to change that person. So I really, I strive to just let those thoughts go away. And I really, and as I'm listening to you, I mean, sure, I could name, Stalin, Hitler, right, whatever, but that's not personal. That's just historical. I mean, I do have like a trigger point, which is this notion of rewriting history. So this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and it's a tendentious topic. In the United States, there was a woman called Kate Smith. So not the one you might be knowing. She was an old singer from the 1930s, and during the Second World War, she raised $100 million or so in the cause for the Allies in U.S. bonds, and she was very well known, and she did a song. She started singing "God Bless America" at the beginning of the New York Yankees games and the Philadelphia Flyers hockey team. So at the beginning of they do these national anthems, the U.S. tradition every time there's a game, professional game. And every time she sang, it was always considered an icon of luck, best for the better result for the team that was hosting her. Back in the 1930s, she sang a song that was at the time a big success. And the name of the song I don't remember, but there's a line in it that is in today's culture completely unacceptable. And the line is, "That's what blackies are for." So obviously, in today's world, that's not acceptable. And what has happened is that they have destroyed her statues and forbid her voice to be sung today because she sang that song. And so my point, of course, is not to evaluate "That's what blackies are for" in 2021. My point is to look back at the history of how she came to sing that song. And if you understand the context, you will have a different outcome. Here's the context. That song, she didn't write it, was written by two men, one of whom was a civil rights activist. The song was part of a satire, a play that was showing up how badly the whites were acting. And so that song was designed to shine a light on the racism that whites were doing in 1931. And for that, we cancel her out. That is a point of trigger. So what I'm trying to get at is you need to understand the history. Spend some time on the context. Don't just look at a tweet and think this is everything. Sometimes there's deeper tissue. And if you just jump to an immediate reaction because that's not good and that's not appropriate today, well, we can risk doing some serious damage to our paths. And if we don't understand our past, then how are we going to construct well our future? There's a thought.
There is a thought. And I think that's such an interesting point about history. And also, what history do we teach young people in school? Because it's, in the UK, anyway, it's quite generic and it's this and this and this. But actually allowing, what an amazing history lesson that would be if teachers or the curriculum allowed students to go, what do you care about? Okay, this, find some tweets that you don't agree with, okay, find them, then go and discover, go and use Google, go and use a library, and build up this picture of context around something, because I think that's so important. And that comes back to empathy. It comes back to understanding what a person's thinking, feeling, doing, before you act on that. And I think we always just jump to conclusions. If I'm in London at the moment, and sometimes I'll be in a car and sometimes I'll be a cyclist, and there's a bit of a
or a pedestrian.
or a pedestrian, exactly. And there's if you're walking, that car should have indicated earlier, or if I'm driving, I should be like, well, that person shouldn't be trying to cross the road whilst they're on the phone. And this idea of what you said, the blues and the greens or whatever it is, you're put on a side, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you just have an alliance to your side, and you think everyone else is wrong. And it again comes back, we're kind of looping back into being self-righteous and always thinking that we're on the right side of history, or we're the right person, or we are more educated, or West is best in our scenario. And I know we've got people on here that will be from all over the world, and ultimately what we're getting down to is that you have to give time to people, and you have to really want to understand another person, want to understand the context as well. I had one question about L'Oreal and your time there, and such a huge organization. And obviously you were, very high up in the organization and dealt with working with a huge array of people across the world. How do you instill empathy in an organization like that, or through an organization like that? And what were your experiences or the challenges of doing that in such a big organization, and maybe the benefits of doing it in such a big organization as well? Because the more people you have on the same kind of ship, the more you can learn from each other as well. So what are kind of the pros and cons of trying to build empathy in such a huge organization?
All right. So generally speaking, I do like to think of business as an agent of change, because there's a real need in society to have empathy, and why not in the 40, 60 hours you're working every week, also generate empathy within that, because that's part of our lives as well. So I'm on balance, I think I really like to think of business as a vehicle of change, a vehicle of bringing good things to life. It does many things, and sometimes it's not so good. When you want to increase empathy in a company or an organization, let's say you're a school with the teachers, the fundamental question should be to understand why you want to do that. Because if it's that you understand that you guys are not empathic, then you also need to be real about that. And so as the person who's implementing it, well, I've realized that I'm not empathic. And let's start from a place of truth. Because by the way, there's an average level and there are people below, and I think we are below average. Why do we want to improve? Well, there's lots of nice things to do. There are many choices you can spend on charities, you can spend time doing many things. Why are you going to focus on building empathy? So you can do that because you think it's just going to make less people firing or less people leaving the company right away. That's not exactly a very value added approach to it. What are we trying to do that's valuable for the company? And you can be very internally focused, or you can actually link it to why you exist as a company. What is the big purpose of your organization? If you don't have a purpose, then you obviously aren't going to be linking it to that. So look, it's an opportunity to reevaluate who you are as an organization. What is your strategy? And then you want to layer in how empathy can participate in making that strategy or purpose come alive. So these are kind of highfalutin terms, if you will, but you need to really consider why you are interested in building your empathy in your organization. And until you do the hard work and think about that, then it's just going to be a nice add-on, one more nice to do. Oh, you know me, you used the word nice before. Oh yeah, that'd be nice.
Mm.
But not everything that's nice is needed. And certainly just because it's nice doesn't mean it will be successful. So it's an opportunity for me again to think about who you are, what are you trying to achieve, and then afterwards going about it. Well, as mentor at one senior executive at L'Oreal, well, the first way is to model the behavior myself. But be careful about there are two things that stop empathy happening in organizations, whether it's at a school, in even in your personal life or at work. There are two things, two big ones. One is a lack of time. Everybody's rushing around doing homework, rushing to do this. Well, of course, in the days prior to the pandemic, we actually had to do things outside. So that added to our activities. Today, there's maybe more opportunity to reflect on things and to be a bit more wise about the way we spend our time. But lack of time. When you are having a conflict with somebody, this is the big topic. This is a really important question, or part of the answer to talking with someone with whom you disagree. How much time do you have for the conversation? Because if you just allocate 15 minutes, there's no way you're going to get to any greater understanding of one another. Even actually having a specific amount of time, so like a 60-minute or 45-minute conversation, there's no way you're going to get to the bottom, because as I know I only have 45 minutes, I need to slip the stuff in. I need to tell Ed, he's got it wrong, I've got it right. And if I don't tell him the last word, So time is really important. If you can allow for an amorphous amount of time for the conversation, then you're not in this need to get it in, dominate, put it through. So time is the first big thing. And the second one is the stress. The stresses of having to perform. I've got to do this homework. I've got to win this game, and you create in your mind a series of messages that dominate, that think about you and your issues, whether it's something you've just done, you're worried about the results or the consequences of having done something that's going to cloud your mind, or you're worried about something I've got to do tomorrow, and you, as a result, you're not being present. So lack of time and stress eliminates our ability to be present and therefore to be empathic. And so when you're negotiating or talking with someone you don't like, or at least, sorry, whose opinions you don't agree with, you need to consider carefully the amount of time you can allocate to the conversation. Of course, that has to be mutual. And then second of all, consider the stresses that you're bringing with you into the conversation. Otherwise, you'll trigger and it'll go wrong. I didn't answer your question. I think I just went off on a rant. I went off on a rant.
Oh, amazing! And that brings us to time. But I mean, what an amazing way to end is reflecting again back on ourselves. If we want to have more empathy towards other people, we actually have to reflect back on ourselves. That's the big takeaway I've got away from you today. We're all, excuse me, constrained with time and stress, and we're thinking, and even I was catching myself there a little bit whilst you were talking, thinking, oh, I need to make sure that I put Minter's little handle in the chat. And I was like, no, listen, focus on what Minter is saying right now, rather than doing that. However, as I'm doing that, I will just do it so I don't
well,
forget.
We know how to multitask, but
we
you're
know how to
right though.
multitask.
We have so many distractions, so many things that are trying to drag us away. I wrote a post recently about notifications. I think notifications are a major problem. And what they are, bing, 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 what they're trying to do is distract our attention. Our attention is so critical in listening. And time is an issue, but notifications are as well. And if there's another message that I can have, if you want to be more present, get rid of all your notifications. As we're speaking to you, I have 0 notifications coming up. My eyes aren't distracted. I'm fully on you. I like to read, other things occasionally, just to like a chat. I'm happy to distract because I'm so keenly aware of my ability to listen. I'm focused in. I've been practicing, but on balance, no notifications. Be present. Give yourself the time to listen to people, which means you need to maybe cut out other things. Because if you know why you want to be listening to people, then you will find the time to do what's important.
Perfect way to end. Thank you, Minter. And you are available at mdial on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please sign up to his newsletter, which I get. I think it's bi-weekly? Minter?
Bi-weekly. It comes out
Bi-weekly.
on the 4th of March. And I should say I've got an event with, I'm screening my film on Wednesday night, March the 3rd. Wednesday, March the 3rd at 6 p.m. My World War II documentary film is being screened for free online in support of wounded veterans.